Afternoon, everybody. It's been a while since I did a video, but we've been asked to do a video on how I square up the chassis on the wizzjet chassis. Everybody knows these chassis are really good. You want a winning car and a fast car, this is what you're going with. And I'm not doing shameless plugs with Wizard products, but it's a shameless plug nonetheless. I'm not in no way, shape, or form being endorsed by RC. I'm just simply stating that these are superior to anything chassis-wise. But that being said, there are some issues. Every chassis has issues. The issues that these chassis have are extremely minimal in comparison to an Aurora chassis or another chassis. The one that is the main issue, or pretty much the only one that I've ever found, was the squareness on the motor plate. Well, there's a tooling issue, a manufacturing process issue, whatever the case would be. I don't know. But I do know that there is an issue getting the motor plate square. And if you look, see this little dimple right here? That was either added on before, after, during, whatever. But that little dimple is to shim the arm, or to shim the plate left to right to make up some slack. And whether or not that was added on the front or not is another question, because it's not there. And on this particular chassis, and I've run into this on other chassis in the back, the back of the chassis having left to right slop. On this particular one, there is none. And it is actually pretty square. And by square, I mean this way, where the cluster shaft goes through. And there are a few different options that people have done, I myself included, and I've seen, if you see some of the people that are driving their cars around and their cluster shaft sticks up like this. And that's usually because what they're doing is they're basically pushing it all the way up so none of the cluster shaft hits inside the chassis. None of it goes inside the lower hole in the chassis. And that is, again, because of the issue that some of these chassis have where they're not square in the back. On this particular chassis, I have it in the front. I have the slop and the play in the front. And this is what I'm talking about. If you can see it. See that left to right movement? And that really screws up just about everything and anything with trying to get that motor to sit dead flat in the box. Which in turn also messes up your gear mesh. If you let this flop around and do whatever, when you accelerate, it kicks to one side, decelerate, it kicks to the other, and you get all sorts of gear noise, all sorts of friction, all sorts of resistance, all sorts of loss of power. And as we know in these cars, friction causes loss of power. So, in this video, we are going to fix this. And the way that I do it, this is 063 tungsten welding rod. And just put it on your tech block. And you want to tap your four corners of the rods. And this is dead square. But the problem lies is that it still flops around. And that's an issue. Again, we're going to fix that. You can test it by putting a motor, just a plain old motor in there, Aurora Dash, Tornado, whatever you want in there. Slide the plate on, clip it as if it's in its final resting place, and you should be able to move the motor. The motor should be able to tap up and down freely. Should be no resistance up and down. You can almost clack it back and forth. As you hear, that's not doing it. This particular chassis is, I've been trying to wiggle this around before I made this video to find out where the sweet spot was. If you push it off to one side, push the plate off to one side, and just kind of hold it there with your fingers, you should be able to move the motor up and down freely, which in this particular case you can. When you hold it to the other side, it binds and will not come back without some sort of resistance. So pushing it all the way over to this side there makes it as free as possible. Okay. And another thing you can do too, if you have a plug, if you have one of these, this is to check the diameter of the armature, to check see if your magnets are shimmed too close, as you could square it up just by doing that. Just put that in there like that, and that's going to be, I guarantee it, that's going to be pretty much damn near straight right there. And you could look, if I can get the, I can see it in my eyes here, but I don't know if I'll be able to get it in this video. I'll try and look through the screen here and see. Now, there's more of a gap here than there is here. Okay? And that's a dead indication that the motor plate needs to come to this side, which I had initially thought anyways. So, we're going to take this and put it over there, because I already have one that's done with this chassis. And all you do is, because this material I have a little bit of an issue with trying to get some of the glue to stick to it. This one was doing the same thing that the other chassis was that I just had in my hand, where it was moving left to right in the front, but not the back. You can see there's nothing done on the back. That's the factory mold mark there. Okay. This one here had a little bit, I needed to add a little bit to this side. If you can kind of get up there and see that. I had to add a little bit to that, and I ended up taking some of it off. So basically, this is almost level, and this was the side I just added material to, if you can see it. This material is a very special and unique material that only certain people can get. I'll show you though, because I want to share my secrets. Super glue. Medium super glue. You can use the thicker stuff, whatever works. I hit it with the Instaset, but I have also run into situations, and it's kind of tricky using the Instaset, is that it'll blow the super glue down on the side of the tab. It'll blow it right down on here, which is kind of annoying. It defeats the purpose, because it takes everything you laid on here and puts it in places you don't want. So you have to kind of scrape it off with a razor knife and start back from square one. Now, I did put a couple of drops on there, put one on there, let it dry, put another one on there, let it dry, and then we fit the motor plate. Oh my Lord, get in the hole. First time, man. Jesus, put hair on it, right? And this plate, one of the things that you want to do when you put this plate into the car, into the chassis, is make sure that it's not pushing back on itself. Now, meaning that I added the glue here, and you don't want it. I dropped it on the floor. You don't want to drop it on the floor. Okay, I'm back. You don't want to put the glue on it so that it pushes the motor plate back up out of the chassis. You want it to sit in there freely with no resistance. And you can see it's kind of pushing up on that a little bit. The whole front of the plate. See that? Okay, and that's an indication of just a tad too much of my super secret super glue. So what we do, take another super secret file. I know, I got all the cool tools here. And just hit it, just kiss it just a little bit, because it wasn't that bad. And remember, it's easier to take off than it is to add. Clean off the burr there, any dust or whatever from the file. And it's still doing it. Now mind you, this one I did add some material on the other side, so you'd want to make sure that this is square. And I would use my magnifying glasses, but yeah, I can't do that and do this at the same time, because this I think is actually causing a problem when I added this onto it. I didn't get it. I didn't sand it level, so it's pushing up on it. So let's take a little bit more off, and there you go. Now the plate is sitting nice and level. It's not pushing back on itself, and we'll put a motor in there. And in theory, this plate motor should flop up and down nice and freely. And that is also, it does move up and down freely, but it's not like loose. I can move it up and down with my fingers, put my nails on, my fingernails on the bottom, and then move up and down freely. I have another chassis that I did. This one's probably pretty good. I would almost call it done. Well, we'll check it real quick. We'll check it with the old block and my super secret rods. No, we're not going this way. We're doing these. I've never had to do that in the chassis. Square it up like in the RT block. I've never had to do one of these like that. These things don't work. But see, that's it. Nothing. So you know it's square. And that chassis, like I said, I bet you that one's pretty good too. We'll check, actually do one more little check with it just to make sure. Where's my plug? Oh, hiding back in this one. So we'll install the plug into the motor box. And you should, in theory, slide this right on down there. And it won't push back in any way in any of the corners. Any of those 4 pins, alignment pins. It should be perfect. And it's actually falling out. That's why it looks like it's loose. Oh, that thing's terrible. This guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. It's actually pushing back on itself because I'm trying to show it in the video. All right, with that being said, this chassis here, I'd already done. I done did. This one required a little bit. This one required front and rear. This one was off. You see there's added material there, a little there. I messed up, so I had to fix that, and that one's left alone. So I was back and forth on that fella for a while. But you put the motor plate in there, and that's the motor slopping around inside the box. This might need to see it. The holes on this one might be a little bit larger. I don't know if this was an early production or a late production, but at any rate, that's why some of the other chassis that I have aren't. The motor's not flopping like that. It's because the holes themselves are probably a little bit bigger, just a slight. I mean, a couple 100 thousandths bigger in diameter. So that's what you want when it's all said and done. You should be able to not have your cluster gear sticking up like this and driving around a track. Like an old bumper car, put a little tag off the end of it. But when you square it up like this, you should be able to get away with running the cluster shaft all the way through, which again, when the crown gear hits the pinion, it's taking that stress off down here on this hole. So it takes the stress off of that, and your final drive gear won't flop around like this. It'll keep your gears more true, make them last longer, and make the car faster. And when it's all said and done, it should be like that. And yeah, I had to put a different plate on this chassis. This plate like this chassis. I don't know why, but it did. I'm sure some people will say, well, they're all the same. They're just different colors. It is true. They are the same and they are just different colors, but they're different production runs. So there's going to be slightly different variances in the molds because, as we know, molds, when you run a hot plastic through it, they tend to deform or whatever. The tolerances get a little off. But nonetheless, these are excellent chassis. And this car right here is a freaking bullet. So I hope that video will help some of you folks out. Please comment and or hit the like button or hit me on Facebook. Got any questions or whatever. Appreciate you watching and have fun building and racing for that matter.